My name is Freighter Crow, and I've always experienced life a little different than most. The veil between the spiritual and physical planes have always been thinner for me than that of your average person. Since a child, I've had the gift to see, talk, and experience the presence of spirits and ghosts. I've used this ability to give voice to those that have passed and no longer are heard or seen by the masses. With my good friend and partner Daniel James, we will shed light onto so many topics and do our part to bring to the surface what often is hidden in darkness.
My name is Daniel James. As early as I have memories, I have had sightings of UFOs, shadow people, beings from other realities, sleep paralysis, and a call to the unknown. My interests in the paranormal has led me into producing films, documentaries, and web series about all of the mysteries that I chase. Now, my journey has led me here. To share these stories with my partner Garrett, and with you.
Are ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was a...
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
Good evening, friends, fans, family, and followers to the Season 4 premiere of Celestial Oddities P.O.N.G, Pair of Normal Guys podcast. We are very excited to be back with the season premiere and bringing you much more great content that you guys expect, and we certainly aim to deliver. As always, I am your host, Freighter Crow.
And I'm your co-host, Daniel James.
We want to thank you for tuning in out there. One of the new announcements that some of you may be aware of, but some of you may not, is not only are we still airing across iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google, and Amazon, and all the other audio platforms in between, but now we also are on video as well. So you can check us out on Facebook, on multiple different platforms, from the Daniel James artist page, the Freighter Crow page, personal page, the Celestial Oddities radio page, as well as Darkness and Divination Instagram, and the Knights of the Nephilim YouTube, which airs all of our shows, not only Knights of the Nephilim, but Pair of Normal Guys and Uncovering the Underground. So if you want to join us not only for audio, and want to see us as well, you want to leave us comments, please do so. We've upgraded this year. We can see your comments from all different types of platforms, answer them from here, and engage with you much more thoroughly, as we always wanted to in the past. As technology advances, so do we. We always try to stay with it and be right there in the forefront with you guys. So there is a chat feature. Feel free to join us, ask us questions, and share it around. Like I said, blast this around. I know people have been anxious to catch the new season, and Daniel and I have certainly been anxious to bring it to you. So Daniel, it's great to be back, my brother.
Yeah, man, it feels good. Thank you very much for your patience, everybody, for your patience, my friend. We had originally planned on starting this season 4 a little bit sooner, but it's been a wild summer, and here we are.
We are, and I'm certainly looking forward to deep diving into a bunch of different topics. And if for those folks that might be new to our show, Daniel and I, throughout the season, every other Thursday night, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we jump into one of 3 segments of the show. We do deep dives into topics and discussions of certain content matter. Tonight will be the Russian sleep experiments. We also have a segment of the show where we interview professionals within the field of paranormal and supernatural phenomena. And then we have our specialty side branch of the show, which is called Odd World, where we take on phone calls from folks just like you from around the world to hear your strange and extraordinary stories of the unexplained. And we never know what we're going to get. And this year, I think, folks, if you're listening out there and you want to be a part of that, it's going to be much more seamless. We always did our best in the past, but we had to arrange Skype calls, and sometimes people didn't answer the call, and then the calls got crisscrossed, and it was always very hard to maintain that. This new platform is much, much easier. So we can put you on, put you off. It's going to be very, very nice. And for anybody out there listening that has a story that would want to share it, either coming on live, or you would like to send it to us in text and have us read it off over the airwaves, we would be glad to do so. Daniel and I hypothesize on what maybe has happened and give some of our theories and input.
That's right.
Now, tonight is going to be an awesome first episode. We're going to talk about a story that, has some certain elements of truth to it. Whether the story itself is true or not, we'll jump into and talk a little bit about. But whether this story is true, there has been many experiments like this been done on human beings over time. And that's what we're going to dive a little bit into tonight. But as always, we want to thank you guys for tuning in, being patient, and we'll go ahead and kick off with a brand new season. Daniel, any words before we start?
I just want to say, hey, Lyra, thank you for being here in the chat. We can see you. Anybody that wants to message us, say hello, we can see that live. So welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. We're very happy to be back here, season 4. And I can't wait to talk about something really weird.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into it. So for the folks that don't know about the Russian sleep experiments, this is actually a story that popped up in 2010 on Creepypasta, which actually was a site before Creepypasta. And they share stories on there, some true, some maybe not. But the story's premises is supposed to take place in the late 1940s in Soviet Russia, where prisoners of war of the Russian soldiers were given an opportunity that if they went through a sleep experiment and stayed up for a very extended long period of time and made it through, that they would be granted freedom. Now, the sleep experiment was to test different types of stimulants on these individuals to try to find a way where the Russians could get ahead of the other countries during the war and be able to find a stimulant to give to their soldiers that would keep them up for prolonged periods, being more effective, being able to conquer more and do more. This is not uncommon. Actually, there has been many nations who have talked about, giving stimulants to their soldiers, whether they knew or not, they were given to them and would stay up for 2 days or so at a time, 2-3 days before crashing. But they would be able to fight through the night and so forth. Now, the first few days of this experiment, obviously these people were happy to jump on it. They were prisoners of war. So yeah, give me a chance to, all I have to do is stay up and then I can be free. Well, that was the case. And the stimulant was given not as a pill, not as an injection, but as a gas form. And there was 5 subjects picked total, and they were put into a room that was shut off and sealed. No one could come in or out. They were given enough food for well over a month for all 5 of them. They were given a restroom. But other than that, it was their beds, their restroom, and their food, and that was it. There is some conflicting information of the story because some accounts say that there were cameras, there was audio equipment, and so forth. Other accounts say that there weren't cameras, so I'm not sure, which is the truth. There was a YouTuber that tried to debunk this by saying that there's faults in the story. But one of the faults he said, which I didn't quite understand, is he said that they couldn't have had cameras in 1940 because they didn't exist. Cameras were made in 1880. So right. I'm really not sure what that was about, but he tried. So, the first 3 days were absolutely fine. First 3 days, everything was normal. Obviously chit chat and maybe some weird behavior, but nothing out of the ordinary. The 4-day marker, they all started to, for some reason, tell about violent stories and traumatic incidences of their past. So they were prisoners of war. They've seen a lot of catastrophic things, but for some reason, all around the same time period at day 4, they all started to want to share their war stories and their traumatic events that happened to them as children and things that they've seen throughout their life. 5 days in, they went into a very deep paranoia where they were just kind of paranoid of everything and not trusting one another, not trusting the experiment. As you can see, the grips of insanity are starting to take hold. And I can tell you personally myself, folks, I don't know. And if you're listening out there and want to leave us something in the chat, please do. I don't know how long you guys have ever stayed up, but I've never made it more than about 2 days.
2 days max. 2 days for me.
2 days. I mean, I've stayed up for, going in well into the second day and then just crash. I can't do it. Like
it's fucking unreal, dude.
It's unreal.
Like
You can take food from me, you can take water from me, you can take clothing from me or whatever, and I can survive for a while. Sleep is the one thing for me that I can't do good without. I mean, I'm the type of dude, if I'm sleep deprived, I become a very different person. I do become
you change.
violent. I become angry and irritated. Some people, they say it's heat. That's why in certain areas like Arizona, people, get into conflicts quickly because of the heat and the humidity, and not in Arizona, but in humidity in other places. Humidity and heat doesn't do shit to me, but sleep, I will snap out on you. So 2 days in, 3 days, I would be nuts. These guys made it to the 5-day marker before going completely paranoid. Now, they do have the aid of a stimulant gas that's being pumped in, but still, 9 days in, they just started screaming uncontrollably. I mean, just nonstop screaming to the one point where they said the one soldier screamed so long and so hard that he tore his own vocal cords out.
Right.
And it was just squeaking afterwards. 12 days, roughly, they believe, they couldn't be seen on the video anymore. And this is the part where they're saying there was video. They couldn't be seen on the video anymore. Scientists had to enter the room at this point. They did not want to. The whole point was to not enter until the 30-day marker because they didn't know what kind of state these people would be in. Would they be violent? And so forth, because it is known that hallucinations will start after a few days. And I think they'll actually start before a few days. Like I said, on the 2-day marker, I was having hallucinations. So
easy.
So I can only imagine 12 days in and on being on a drug the whole time. But they decided, against their better judgment, let's go ahead and open the vault and let's go in. Now, when they entered, they said it was a horrific scene. One of them was already dead. The other ones all had giant chunks of flesh missing. Now, before I say this, I should say that the one on the floor that was dead was very badly eaten. They had cannibalized this man. And also themselves, where the story goes, believable or not, they ripped off huge sections of their own flesh and started to pull their own organs out of their body.
Right. They were like eating their fingers and stuff.
Eating their fingers and playing with their own organs. Now, a lot of people would jump and say, well, obviously that's bullshit because that's not possible and not realistic. Well, in a normal sense, that could be. But when you break the bounds of reality in your own mind, what is possible and not possible is very questionable. When you add in a very toxic and potent drug into that, it changes the chemistry of what your body's capable of. How many videos have we seen where people on crystal meth and crank have been shot 4 or 5 times and just
bath salts?
Yeah, bath salts where they're able to be hit with tasers and it doesn't even affect them. They're being shot and they're just laughing and running. I mean, it can change the chemistry of what we're capable of. Ultimately, they will die, but it's like a deer. You hit a deer with a car and it jumps up and runs off and you're like, how is that possible? Because when that adrenaline activates in that animal, it takes it to a part where it's able to stay alive after it shouldn't. Humans normally can't, but with the aid of drugs, sometimes they can. Now, after they seen these soldiers at this point, they had to back the hell out and call the other soldiers in. They called in Russian soldiers to come in and kind of contain the situation. Now, 5 soldiers apparently died because once they entered the room to try to contain these 4 remaining paranoid, schizophrenic, sleep-deprived prisoners of war, they attacked the Russian soldiers and killed several of them.
So let me interrupt you right there. There's one point I want to actually add. Something that we forgot in terms of like the linear process. So they were actually spoken to and they were briefly interviewed, and the people at that point, if you could call them people anymore, they were actually speaking as if they weren't themselves anymore, and they weren't identifying exactly as their own former selves in terms of like a continuity of their identity. And they were actually saying things like that they wanted to stay awake, that they didn't want to sleep, that in the state that they were in now, they were almost in like a type of euphoria, that they had gone beyond a threshold, a precipice of no return, that being in the state that they were in, desperately, lethally sleep deprived, they were like happy and euphoric. And as they were like, destroying and destroying their own bodies and eating their fingers and stuff and tearing their skin off, they kept talking about how being awake was like this pleasure for them. And it is, so I'm going to get really deep into this later, but I wanted to add that one little note before there was intervention. They did actually express that once they got beyond a certain point, that they weren't themselves psychologically, mentally, or even through their own identity. They were almost like vessels, and that the beings, the entities that were present now in these vessels, that just were like basically like destroying themselves. They were in like a state of euphoria. They seemed like they were in like deep pleasure, and they were in joy that they were in this state at the point before the intervention happened. So that was one note I wanted to add.
What's interesting too is they said to them through the speakers, "We have to enter the room now. Be compliant." And they tried to, bluff them. If you are compliant, we will we'll give you your freedom. So they promised them freedom if they made it through the experiment. But at day 12, when shit went absolutely wrong, they came through the speaker and said, "If you are compliant, we'll go ahead and give you your freedom now." And what's interesting is the men all said out loud, "We don't want freedom.
That's what I'm saying.
We are free." Yes, exactly. Yeah. We're already free because they broke the bounds of humanity pretty much.
That's right.
And then they pumped air, regular clean air, because they've been at this point pretty much only giving them toxic, gas stimulant. And when they gave them clean air, the soldiers actually started screaming. The clean air was like toxic to them. It was vice versa. And what I found very interesting is after the soldiers came in, after they killed several of the Russian soldiers, after they were able to contain them, I believe one of them was killed in the skirmish between the soldiers. So that left only 3 of them remaining. One of them succumbed. They took them into like an operating room to try to patch them up because they wanted to continue the experiment. Once they took them into the room to try to patch them up, one died on the table. The second one, they were able to patch up, but then I believe he attacked one of the doctors or something along those lines, and they end up putting him down. And then same thing with the last one. The last one, as they were operating supposedly, they were putting the organs back inside of him and sewing him up, and he was laughing the whole time. He found it hilarious. They said he was actually looking at the nurse and winking at her and flirting with her. Meanwhile, his organs are hanging out of his body, and the story supposedly goes that she was so disturbed by this because you're looking at this man that should be dead, that should be in extreme pain, and he's laughing and giggling and flirting. So it was very interesting. But one of the things to finish out my portion of the story is what they said. They said, "What are you?" Because at this point, they were no longer looking at them like humans. They looked at these prisoners of war and says, "What are you?" And the response given was, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be freed from the depths of your animal minds." And that was the statement they gave. And I love that. And I think there's something to be said there, because a take that I can give for the folks listening out there is, as most of you know, if you listen to past seasons, I am a ceremonial magician or ceremonial practitioner. I'm an occultist, and I work with a lot of different spiritual energies and currents. There's often the debate of, are these entities real, and meaning external from us? Are they internal pieces of our psychological genetic makeup? Are they pieces of the collective unconscious? What are they? And I've always given the synopsis of they're both. They are external currents of energy that lies without us, and through the ignition of our own will and our own unlocking of certain higher faculties of mind, we ignite that substance and we can bring about change internally as well as externally at the same time. But the reason I say this is that there's a heavy belief and understanding that a lot of the demonic spirits that you encounter through ritual are really only dark faculties of your own unconscious and subconscious mind. So you're encountering visually audibly, sensatorily, these beings that for all sense of the purpose, whether they're coming from you or not, they are projected on a material lens, and you're seeing them, you're hearing them, you're encountering them, and they can do magnificent things and cause magnificent manifestations and things to come to fruition in this world. So then you start to say, well, if that's me, that's crazy that I'm able to like split out a piece of my consciousness into this world and then bring it to life. Well, kind of the same premise here of these soldiers. They stayed awake for so long that they broke the rules and the shackles of what it means to be a regular human being and tapped into a zone of their mind that allowed them to become something deep, something dark, something forbidden or forgotten. And that's what emerged. And as they said, have you forgotten so easily that we are the madness that lurks within you all? Daniel?
That's right. So, you can still hear me? You can still see me? Good.
You just cut out for some reason. You've been good the whole time until just now.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. So, on that same thread, on that same thought, when I was studying the concept of the secret space program and super soldier, which we've had an episode on in the past, right?
You're breaking up for some reason. That's very peculiar. I've been hearing you the whole time, and your camera's been working flawlessly the whole time, and all of a sudden now everything's freezing just as you go to talk. Bear with us, folks, while we're having technical difficulties. That's always the fun of live shows. I had someone say that a week ago. They're like, I can't believe you do all your shows live. That's ballsy. And I says, no, there's no other way. I can't record a show and put it up afterwards. I have to do it live because even though things like this can happen, guys, that's what makes it raw and that's what makes it real. So we're going to figure out what's going on here because there shouldn't be any issue. So it could be someone fucking with us. Me and Daniel have talked about this in the past where as we go to air our show and talk about a strange and obscure thing, something doesn't like us doing that. So Daniel, go ahead and try to talk again and we'll see if that happens.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can. There's an echo, but I can hear you.
Okay. Just stop me if I cut out.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So on that same thread, when I was studying the concept of like super soldiers and the secret space program, one thing that can happen is you can actually, okay, your human vessel, your human body it's a conduit for consciousness and for the non-physical. Which means that, like Daniel James is actually a consciousness that's down into the physical avatar.
I'm getting hold on a second, Daniel. I'm getting some comments here saying it's breaking up really bad, and then I got another comment here, which makes no sense, Daniel. I know this is our first episode, but I've ran 9 episodes of Nights of the Nephilim from people all over the world so far, and there hasn't been a single hitch until tonight. That's why I say I think something's fucking with us. And then I got another comment here saying little choppy on this side, guys. We're not sure why that's happened, and please, if someone can leave me a comment, is it both of us or is it just Daniel? Telling you, Dan, forces that be, brother.
Yeah, it's like my internet. It must be my internet. I don't know. My speed's just totally tanked. Like I checked my connection, and it's like I don't have like the bandwidth to stream like this right now. It's based on my speed.
Yeah, because I got some. I have 2 comments that came and says just Daniel. That's strange. Yeah, because it shouldn't really pull that much bandwidth from you, like I said, because it's done a pretty good for everyone else. But like I said, it could be a force beyond us that is pulling the strings. Well, folks, we're going to try what I'm going to do. I don't know if it'll make any difference. It shouldn't. I'm going to eliminate anything else that I got going on here. So I have the ambient music in the background. I'm going to go ahead and cut that. See if that helps give any more power to it. I think it might just be on your end, Daniel, like you said. But let's go ahead and try that one more time.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my internet feeds. And I also see my connection to the server that hosts our chat as well. So I get something in the evening where I live. I live in a small town. And we have something called network traffic where for like 7:30, 8 o'clock, my internet speed just totally tank.
Makes sense, though. You have a lot of people coming home from work, so it like triples how many people or quadruples how many people were like searching Facebook and watching YouTube and porn and everything else. So
so much porn.
There's a lot of porn watching right now.
Internet, yeah, but it's called network traffic, and basically, like the internet companies, they can called throttle. So what that is, if they can actually tell what everybody on their network is doing, if they're gaming, if they're streaming video like this, or if they're just watching Netflix, they can tell what the draw is. And live streaming is one of the biggest draws. So they'll take your internet speed and throw it for people that are streaming like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and stuff.
We could try one thing. I heard you pretty good there. There's a couple little breakups, but I heard you. Wonder if we could try something, folks. And I bear with us out there. If you're hearing it and you're saying there's some technical difficulties, give us a moment. Daniel, I hate to say this. Let's try something. Because, yeah, it is actually, I'm looking right now. There's a panel I just opened up, and it shows the connectivity of us. Like right now, I'm on 5 bars. You're on 1.
Right.
So if I go, and I think you might only be able to do it from your end. There's a way of only coming through audio, I believe, and cutting the video. I hate to say to do that, but if for tonight, if it's not working, maybe you can cut your video and only be audio. I don't know if that would still work, and it might cut down because obviously video pulls more than audio does. I don't think. I don't think I can do that.
Yeah,
On
I don't like doing anything else in my house. Like a draw in my internet from my house. The thing is the network traffic. Just from living in a residential, my internet provider throttles the internet, so because I'm streaming, it probably like choked me out.
Well, let's try this real quick. If I click this, that's only for me. It doesn't do it for you. Well, shit. I was gonna say I can maybe try to kick off your video just while you do the talking portion, and then bring you back on in between. It's a little odd, but when I click the video thing, it only kicks my video off. So I'm still on audio wise, as you can see, but I'm not on video wise. But it doesn't let me do it for you.
Let me try one thing as well.
And if you guys have a question out there, feel free to ask or give input on the Russian sleep experiment or anything else. Please feel free to engage. This is season 4, episode 1. So it's great to have people interacting. And thank you to AJ and to Lyra for jumping on here and being a part of that. So I know there's other people watching that maybe just not commenting. It's always fun, like I said, to get hit with the surprises that we have to work with. It's always something new. But that's okay. I would still pick this any day over the fucking phone calls that we had to do on Skype because that shit was crazy.
Yeah, those were a nightmare.
I was always stressed. I'm not stressed anymore. I was like,
it always happened. Like we couldn't hang up the calls either. We have to like end the call and recall each other.
Yeah, like our caller would be done, and we'd be like, all right, we got to end the entire call. And I'd have to cut Daniel off and the caller off and then call them back. It sucked. I never have to do that again, which is really, really nice. So thank you to the techies out there that have created such platforms like this.
Yeah.
Now, Daniel, I hear you pretty good right now. So let's go ahead and pick that back up and we'll just cross our fingers.
Right. So in regards to what I was saying is that, okay, so the human body, it's like an avatar. Like the human body is like an avatar. And that means that we're actually downloading our own consciousness into the body, from another realm, in a sense. So, if Daniel James is downloaded into my physical body, then there are actually things that you can do or things that can be done to you that will actually fractalize your mind. You can actually break the mind and break the connection that you have from your consciousness to your body. You can actually fracture that, like fracturing. And this is often done through people who get like extremely intoxicated. You're on heavy drugs, psychedelics. Oftentimes, people who abuse psychedelics and plant medicines can happen to them too. But specifically, like in the secret space programs and the super soldier programs, what they can do is they can fracture your mind and partition your consciousness. And they do that. Through a variety of different things, like sleep deprivation is one of them. Sleep deprivation is one of them to fracture the mind, but also they use, forced use of psychedelics, certain drugs, trauma, unfortunately, physical trauma that puts the body into such sort of an sensory overload physically can actually fracture your mind, and they can create partitions. So this moves your consciousness out of the vessel so that something else can come in. or alternatively, instead of something else coming in by fracturing the mind, but they can also just create partitions where multiple versions of you are almost like a hard drive that's partitioned. Multiple versions of you are actually in this in your vessel, which is just an avatar that supports consciousness, like a machine that you can download consciousness into. So what my theory is that they actually traumatized the soldiers so much that they created what's called as mind fractures, where basically they broke the person's consciousness and separated it from the physical vessel. And whoever those people were, whoever those soldiers were, before they went beyond a certain point into the sleep experiment, I believe that they were mind fractured, their consciousness left, and when the consciousness leaves, almost like a resident, like an inhabitant, into the vessel, then the vessel still, if it's not dead, it's open now. It's open real estate. So if a physical person, their consciousness leaves the body from trauma or sleep deprivation or psychedelics or drug use, intoxication, anything that can break the consciousness out of the body, and the body still lives, that body is an empty vessel, and anything that knows how can just walk right in. They can step in. And I think that when someone is going through an extreme amount of trauma, which is what that amount of sleep deprivation is a certain degree of trauma, I think they mind fractured. I think their souls, their consciousnesses, they left, and those vessels were probably targets. They were probably beacons for certain entities, astral parasites, whatever people's definitions are. But there are all kinds of things like that that oftentimes prey on people that are in states of trauma and can literally, for lack of a better term, possess them, which I would call this type of possession. I would call it less of a possession and more of like a walk-in type of idea, where the soldier's consciousness left from the sleep deprivation and the trauma that their bodies went through. The spirit goes to a certain point where it can't take it. It's almost like dying. So the consciousness left, then that body, in a sense, like an invitation, AJ, that body then is an open vessel for anything that knows how to inhabit it, how to take it over, how to step in, how to walk in, how to possess it, how to download in there. And so those beings that the scientists were then communicating to after the what I call like a mind fracture happened, those beings were other entities that stepped in, that possessed the vessel, that took it over. And that's why those beings were, for lack of a better description, consuming themselves and creating self-harm, causing physical pain, which for them was a type of pleasure, and then expressing that they really enjoyed the sleep deprivation, that they felt they were sort of like at peace with it and they were enjoying it. Their characters changed, their personalities changed. They certainly weren't themselves. Because I'm speculating here, but I believe that entities from another plane just saw those vessels open, and they were already of a frequency match in terms of like vibration attracts like vibration. Those people, those soldiers, those vessels were already so traumatized to a point that they were only going to, I mean, we're not attracting fucking angels here. Let's be honest. That sort of vibration, that sort of state of being, that state of trauma only tends to attract a certain type of entity, a certain type of being. So then, now let's say that soldier, that person, they fracture, they break, their soul, their consciousness leaves, but the body stays alive. They just walk in. They just take over. Now they're inhabiting that vessel and they're enjoying what's happening to it. They're enjoying the self-inflicted pain, the trauma, the, mutilating themselves, the sleep deprivation, which creates its own physical trauma on the body. And so basically my speech here is that I believe what happened was that those people just left their bodies, and entities that are attracted to that type of circumstance, that type of trauma, that type of low vibrational frequency, they literally possess the vessels, and whatever those beings were, whatever those entities were that were in the bodies beyond that point of no return for the soldiers through the experiment. These are entities now that are, it's just enjoying the opportunity to be in the 3D in a free body that, for lack of a better description, was basically just an open machine for the taking.
I think it's a very good point, and I mean, we've talked about, and folks, Daniel and I have covered extensive amount of subjects from shadow beings to cryptids and everything in between. I mean, we can go over sometimes some of our past topics if you guys don't know, so you can go back and check them out because we've talked about a lot. But one thing that we found very um, reminiscent of all people who have encountered shadow beings and sleep paralysis is usually some type of trauma or some type of sadness, sorrow, or depression in their life. So people who are alcoholics a lot of times experience shadow beings. People who were molested or raped experience shadow beings. People who are
That's right.
depressed and suicidal experience shadow beings. Now, there are people out there that won't admit to those things because they don't like to admit their own weaknesses. So they'll say, well, I've experienced them and I've never seen them. You might be lying to yourself, and that might be part of the problem. There are people out there who have experienced them that don't have those symptoms. So it's not 100%, but I noticed that time and time again, the phone calls we've gotten, the reports we've gotten, and people I've interviewed and talked to have that in common. Now, you push someone's mind to the breaking point of 12 days of no sleep. Like I said, Daniel and I had said 2 days for us before we just passed out and blacked out. Imagine staying up 6 times that long. And one thing I would like to point out, piggybacking off of Daniel would be, yes, possession, something taking over, but we need to, once again, not take a look at the external. There are 2 universes going on here. There's the one inside of ourselves, which is the absolutely vast, unimaginable, endless God universe. We are gods. There is the external plane that we all play on, which is the boot camp of Earth and this material realm. So when something takes over us, we oftentimes automatically want to believe that it has to be something external from ourselves, meaning something outside of this body, which it is, but it's coming from within. So when you get to those darker channels of your mind, when you go 12 days of no sleep, when you start to crack and fractalize your personal egoic psyche from your animalistic self and higher spirit, and you start to section off those pieces of what and who you are,
Right.
pieces awake inside of you that are very different than what you would distinguish as yourself, but might be lower vibrational pieces of yourself. As I mentioned, prior to this, that demons a lot of times are fractals of ourself. Now, they might be very independent of us. They might hurt things. They might hurt you. But when you go inside of yourself, it's the vastest world you could ever possibly enter into. It's much more vast than this world of externality. So we have to look at that as Daniel said, these beings took over, these soldiers. They pushed back into themselves their ego, who they were, their character. And there's different stages of possession. And we're not going to go into all that tonight, but there's different levels of possession. And as a ritualist and as someone who works very much with darker spirits, I do allow self-possession of different entities where they will overtake me and they will actually have control of me, but I still am there. But you're pushed back to different degrees of self where they might be operating through you, but you are still there. Now, you have to go through extreme methods of self-hypnagogic trance, meditation to be able to achieve these levels usually, unless something just overtakes you. So I can't speak from a perspective of someone who has been traumatized by massive lack of sleep. But I would imagine that's a very crude form of just doing this faster. Instead of having to go through months or years of hypnagogic trance and meditation,
Right.
go 12 days without sleep and it just slices your identity in half and you're gone. So when these things came through, a lot of times these things will thrive on pain, sorrow, and any type of lower vibrational act. So ripping out their own skin caused pain and sorrow. The fear caused by the scientists and soldiers when they came into the room feeds them. The saying that we don't want to be free. They don't need to be free because even if the vessel dies, they still exist. So once that soldier, that prisoner of war dies, that person no longer exists as that character. But the beings that you're seeing come through that character are very much still alive in the same people that are in fear looking at them. As
Right.
they said, we exist inside all of you. But most of us just never get to that frequency that they come alive. So as they come out, go ahead and kill me. Go ahead and do whatever you want because you can't end me. You can only end the vessel that I inhabit. And I think that is very much, in this case, if it is to be believed, that is what happened is these pieces of ourself, but also something very much beyond ourself. You have to define that line of when you say yourself, what do you mean? Do you mean the character of Freighter Crow? Or do you mean the essence of really what I am beyond the flesh because I'm
Right.
something so much greater that inhabits everything in existence, the God force? So, I mean, it's a very interesting subject and topic. And as I said at the beginning, whether this is true or not, this specific story, it's very much true because someone could say, well, this is bullshit and it never happened. Maybe this specific tale where it gives details of 5 men and their organs, maybe that didn't happen. But let's take a look at Nazi Germany. Let's take a look
Right.
at the concentration camps. Let's take a look at Hendrik Heimsler or whatever the fuck his name is. I can never say his name right. I always mess it up. A very occult general of the SS who, Himmler, he loved occultism. He loved experimentation and he used human beings, prisoners of war, as his own science experiments to test out all kinds of crazy experiments. So to think that putting men in a room and seeing how long they can go without sleep is like insane, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And this has been done time and time again. We know for a fact there's been experiments here on our own home soil in the United States where they fed prisoners LSD in very, very high amounts to see what the human mind could handle and what that level of opening the mind up would do to someone. Could they open up, supernatural powers? That has been done. That's accounted for. That's documented. This isn't fabrication. This is things that have happened in history. So it's not a far skip and a jump to say that they've done a lot of sleep experiments on people, and I'm sure much, much worse. I mean, look at the MK Ultra programs and
Right.
look at the super space, program, super soldiers programs where
That's right.
they're breaking you of your humanity to open up what's beyond that. And that's
That's
what
right.
happened to these soldiers.
Totally. Absolutely. And I mean, with that being said, that this particular experiment's like small potatoes compared to some of the things that we do and have done and probably still do, to our own soldiers or to our own civilians, using the same type of, in a sense, technology to basically hack the mind and hack the body. So
That's what it is. And I mean, we have a comment here saying handing over your frontal lobe for a while. And that's what it is. I mean, it's for anybody who's ever experienced possession. And I mean, most people haven't, but for anybody who has, it is a very obscure and interesting thing, every time it happens, but certainly at the beginning. And you are still very much seated inside yourself, but you take a back seat. You're no longer driving. You just go climb in the back of your car, and now someone else is driving, and you're watching. You're still there. You can still yell out. You can still slap the driver and say, "Hey, you're going the wrong fucking way." But you're no longer the one holding the steering wheel. And it can be very interesting at first. And depending upon the level of the being you're working with or the matter of how this fractalization happened, whether self-induced or, as I said, just chopped from you, that can depend on how much control these type of beings, take of us. And it's a very scary thing. Obviously all 5 of these people were said to have died or have been shot. There was actually the final one they said was shot by one of the soldiers because he was so terrified of this prisoner of war that he shot him. And the prisoner fell back into a table and just started laughing at him because it didn't even affect him. And then he shot him a couple more times and then killed him. But once again, just like heavily induced, heavily drug induced, people out there who are on crank or on bath salts and different things, they do take bullets. I've watched videos of people taking multiple rounds and just keep running like it doesn't even affect them. And that is terrifying, folks. But it goes to show you how much power we truly have within us, depending upon what we tap into. Let's
Right.
take a look at some of these comments here, and I've been throwing them up on the screen, but I'm going to read a couple off because we have several came up here. I said something about we're all gods, and Faith here said, "I am a goddess." We're all gods and goddesses. It just depends on what degree that you tap into. In theory, all of us are, whether you ever do anything to enhance that or not. But there's certainly ways of enhancing that beyond the normal populace of mundane humanity. We don't know as humans that we are gods, which is the following statement from her. Open your mind and open your potential. We have been created as slaves, but we are ascending as gods. We are, but there's multiple levels to that, like I said. And I'm a person that believes we should experiment with how deep we can go into our own mind, but in ways that are a little less severe, but not necessarily. I mean, some of the methods I use are pretty intense, but I'm not going to stay up for 12 days, folks. It just isn't going to happen. But I mean, that goes to show you why in the grimoires do they talk about a specific, and I've talked about this, in nauseum, about the fact that even though I am a devil worshiper and even though I practice dark arts, I follow the grimoire guidelines, which a lot of Satanists and devil worshippers will cast out and say that's bullshit because I don't do these practices. That's more of a Christian thing. No, it's not. As David Rankin and I talked about on a recent episode of Knights of the Nephilim, there's reasons that before you summon these beings or summon aspects of your deep subconscious,
Right.
that you will purify. You take a purifying bath of certain
Right.
salts and things, that you fast and don't eat for a certain period of time, that you abstain from sex and from ejaculating for a certain period of time, that you, and this, we didn't talk about this on our show with me and him, but there are other grimoires that talk about, instead of getting well rested in sleep, they talk about the opposite. They say that for a week prior to ritual, you should only get 3 or 4 hours of sleep every night. So by the time you perform ritual, you are tapped into some type of zone of your mind that no one else can tap into, but you're purified. You're tapped in. You saved up the dragon force energy of sexual energy inside you. All of these things allow you to open astral gates to realms that normal human beings can't tap into. And really, that's the premise of the story, that they did in a way against their will, even though they volunteered because of freedom, waving the carrot in front of the horse. They were never going to be given freedom. Even if they would have made it to 30 days, they would have shot them at the end and buried them.
Oh, easy.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like a given. They were just dumb to think that they would ever be given freedom. But, it is sad that these type of things happen. Right now, folks, I hope you know, and I'll let Daniel, say anything he would like to say. Right now, as we are having this show, and Daniel and I are just, jamming out on our conversations and what we believe, and while you guys are leaving comments and listening in, there are individuals locked in chambers right now as test subjects, having horrific things done to them by other individuals that are using them as science experiments. That's happening right now as we speak. And that is sad, but that is the grim reality of this world. And that'll always be the grim reality of this world. So we need to take a time to appreciate that, not say it's a good thing, but appreciate the fact that, we are where we are, and that you have the freedom that you have, and that you get to choose how you tap into those deeper aspects and not have someone do it for you.
Right. I agree. And, similar to the protocols, we'll call them protocols, that you have before going into any sort of like exercise or invitation, for channelers, like I can channel, I know how to channel. I used to be a channeler. But it's a similar thing where you're inviting the consciousness of another being or another entity or another aspect of yourself into the forefront. And you're allowing it to use your physical vessel as a conduit to express an alternate consciousness, an alternate entity through. And, most channelers who know what they're doing and care about their bodies and their safeties, and want to have a positive, holistic sort of engagement, they'll do a cleansing protocol. And whether it's sort of like a rhythmic breathing or a series of visualizations, a lot of people work with crystals or minerals or grounding techniques. Everybody has like a type of protocol that they would do before they allow their physical vessel to be used by another entity to bring through another consciousness. So I liked what you said about, that sort of exercise, almost like a ceremony that you have working up to a ceremony. Like we had a comment here that Lyra said, the sacrifice, that sort of action, that exercise of all of the things you do in your protocol before you work with that being or that entity or that current. I can appreciate that because, like I said, for channelers, although it only takes maybe a few minutes for us to cleanse and prepare, we all sort of, in a sense, have that sort of exercise to prepare us, to work with spirit.
Well, it's really
So
like
that was
you're
cool that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's like we're tuning forks.
Right.
We are receivers and projectors of frequency, as you and I have talked about, extensively. And sometimes to get your tool, your vessel, your body, your mind to a certain frequency, you have to do certain things. And
Right.
and as you said, a lot of times if you're working with an angelic being of sorts or a very high divinity, you have to be very pure. I mean, this isn't
That's right.
like once again, people are like, it's Christian belief. No, that's not. That's just how things work.
Right.
You're working with something higher, you have to elevate your frequency. It's just fucking common sense. But when you want to work with darker things, and that's not to say that certain daemons or demons that you don't have to be very in tune to do it, but we're not talking what came through these prisoners of war wasn't like your Ashmodei or Belial or these other type of king demons that people recognize. These were, as Daniel said, parasitic entities, which
Right.
I consider to be the real demons. You can call these other spirits that are guiders of humanity that will help you demons when really they're old pagan gods and things that people,
Sure.
can summon. They were enlighteners of humanity, the fallen, the
Totally.
watcher angels. No, I'm talking about the things beyond that. I'm talking about the things that look at us like snacks that do still exist out there, the astral parasites, which are the true demons, and they will attach and they will come through. And oftentimes, as we talked about with sleep paralysis and shadow beings, you have to be a lower vibration to open the doorway to let them in. Sometimes they'll find their way in on their own, but you are the doorway and you choose if you open it, shut it, throw it wide open, kick the fucker down. And a lot of times, people who do extensive drug abuse, if you're constantly high, you're constantly drunk, and you're just abusing the shit out of your
Right.
mind and body, you are a wide open fucking doorway.
You're
for all these
creating a
creatures.
vibrational frequency that they're attracted to. So I actually want to touch on that real quick,
Please
just
do.
for Lyra and Faith. Lyra and Faith, if you're both still watching, I wanted to acknowledge you that you mentioned shadow people. And one thing I wanted to just remark on what Freighter's saying is that shadow people are they are an entire race of beings, just
Yes.
like you and I, just like humans. They have an organized civilization. They have buildings. They have structures. They have transportation. They have a way of life. They have a sustenance and a food source. So the shadow people, like I mentioned, they are a total species. Okay. And they just so happen to be a race of beings that are attracted to 3D or third density beings like us that are in a lower vibrational frequency. So, like Freighter said, if you're somebody who's, abusing drugs, somebody who's drunk and high all the time, this more often than not can create a sort of negative lower vibrational oscillation in your frequency. It doesn't necessarily lower your consciousness, but it lowers the vibrational rate of your 3D reality. And generally speaking, when you're in these ranges, right, you're having more negative emotions, fear, anxiety, stress, anger, hate, self-worth problems, guilt, remorse, all of these words that I'm using, these are measurably lower vibrational frequencies than that of love and joy and gratitude and appreciation. Those types of energies, those types of emotions have a frequency to them. So the shadow people, like I mentioned, they are a structured, organized race of beings, just like humans. They just exist in another frequency. They exist in another version of reality that we don't perceive with our 3D senses, but they're still there. They're still very real, just like you and I. And the shadow people are oftentimes seen in places that have had a history of trauma. They've had a history of, tragedy, and they generally do sort of hang around people that abuse their bodies. They're in toxic relationships. Maybe they're having a really negative, hard week because work, your car broke down, you're having medical issues, whatever it is, it puts you in a negative vibrational frequency. Those people tend to see more shadow entities. They tend to have more nightmares, encounter more, sleep entities that tend to sort of prey on people who are in a lower vibrational frequency when they're sleeping. So I just wanted to acknowledge you both in the chat that I appreciate the comments and that the shadow people, a lot of people don't know because for lack of, scientific definition, they are a real race of beings that exist. And they do tend to hang around people that are having lower vibrational circumstances in their life.
They are, and they also can appear outside of dreams and outside of that as well. I've seen them, and I'm not someone who's depressed. I don't abuse drugs. I don't drink to excess or anything of the sort. I've actually seen them in investigations of very paranormal hotspots where sometimes ghost folks can take the form of a shadow, so that's different. There's shadow beings. I've seen beings that were specifically of that race that have for some reason or another came into our world, decided to stay here. Now, before we go much further, I want to read some of these comments here. We have a friend of mine told me a story about a woman who was supposedly possessed by this parasite, claiming to be a Leviathan. When she told me that, I laughed. Lying parasites, they want fame. And that's funny that you say that, the Black Magician, because I was actually going to make a comment on that. So let me come back to that in just a second. Let's read some of these other ones because we have several coming in here. And this one says, and that's why some abuse drugs to connect. The problem with that is that they get to a point where they feel they cannot connect without the drugs. And that's the problem, is that's a fallacy. They might use drugs to connect, but you don't need to use drugs to connect. And people will fall into that loop that I need it, I have to.
That's right.
And that's a problem. I seen a post earlier from someone who I respect online, but he was saying that, you know, any religion that tells you that you can't follow the 7 sins and still reach divinity is a liar, saying that you can indulge in all 7 sins and still reach divinity. And while you possibly can do that, you have to know your own boundaries. And I don't believe anything in excess is good. I don't believe sex. I don't believe booze. I don't believe drugs. I don't believe lying, cheating, stealing, anything. If you want to do that, that's fine. But anything that you go into an excess of life is a mundane human faculty meant to hold you down. They were
Right.
natural born into the fabric of this reality matrix to hold you from reaching your ascension of a higher being in a higher vibration. Sure, go out and have fun, indulge, drink, fuck, have a good time. But you got to know your limits, because if you're doing it every day, every hour, you're not focusing on the thing you should be, which is yourself and ascending. So that is, Lear, that is definitely something that people fall into, that pit. Now we have another comment here that says, I don't know what the hell I just did. I don't know. I tried to click on, there it goes. It says, I'm going through some horror movie shit and I need a reading. Does anybody out there do readings? I get asked constantly, Faith, if I'll read for people. I don't. I read every single day, but I don't read for anybody but myself. So I can point you in the direction of some of my friends who do and are very good, but I myself do not do readings for others. It's just a personal thing. There's only about 2 people in this world that I read for. Unfortunately, it's not open to the public. We have one here that says, regarding shadow people and their reality as a race, I agree. Like Fae and Jinn, not the same as pure spirits. These are body soul composites. Now, this comes from the Black Magician. And I want to go back to that first thing that you mentioned, that these parasitic entities, or as Candace above, who I threw the comment on there, I believe, and if I didn't, I'll throw it on here now. She said the comment of the astral larva. And that's very important because these are very real things. And what happens
That's right.
is a lot of occultists actually have never came into contact with any god form or any daemon or any demon. Well, traditional like Belial or anything. They've come into contact with astral larvae. And these larvae tell you that they're gods. This is a very common thing. And David Rankin and I on Knights of the Nephilim talked specifically about this, that is actually one of the reasons you do cast a circle. You do use a triangle manifestation. You bathe. One of the things we said about the people really don't realize, self-confession. Now, people say self-confession. That is a very like biblical religious thing. No, it isn't. You standing and facing yourself and naming out the sins that you've committed and facing it gets it out of you. You're no longer holding that back. It's no longer a darker aspect. And as you get that out, that's the shit that these type of beings feed off of. And when you throw that out there and you no longer feel guilty and you faced it and you've accepted it, it gives them less to grab onto. You're a slippy surface and they can't grab on. But astral larva folks are very real. And as the Black Magician had put, someone said that they were talking about Leviathan. Well, here's the problem, I would say. 1, they most likely weren't, and they were talking to a larva of some sort. 2, you don't talk to Leviathan. Leviathan truly is an aspect of the collective unconscious and subconscious of your mind. Unlike some of these other entities that can take shape as a being, you might conjure Leviathan and he shows up as a being. But let me tell you, Leviathan is symbolic of the darker unconscious mind. That's what Leviathan has been given, a form and a name. All that stands for, folks, is the dark recesses of your mind. Leviathan's not a being. If anything, he's an egregoric being because people believe he's real, just like Lucifer. But he is just a construct. Now, we have some other comments pouring in here. Regarding, we already read that one. I'll embrace the shadow, folks. You should embrace the shadow. Shadow work's the most important thing and most powerful thing you could ever do. If you can't accept yourself and face yourself, why face anything else? Alephus Levy. People don't read The Doctrine and Ritual of Transcendental Magic. It's one of the best books that's ever been written, Black Magician. Alephus Levy, as anybody knows who follows me, is my top 3 best writers of all time. I mean, for me, it's Alephus Levy, Manly P. Hall, and Aldous Huxley are the 3 absolute fucking geniuses. Now, I would go into Paracelsus and obviously Plato and Pythagoras and people like that as well. But those 3 specifically for me have really changed my life. If you can't face yourself, what makes you think you can face God? Well, that's what I was just saying, Larry. If you don't face the inner aspects of yourself, you're always going to hold yourself back from your full potential. You have to unleash those sides, whether you do it through meditation, through yoga, through ceremonial magic or ritual magic, through pagan practices, whether you do it through hallucinogenics. That's a great way of doing it. I'm a big advocate for plant medicine and using psilocybin mushrooms and things like that. Even though these ones here, folks, don't let me mislead you. That's not psilocybin. That's muscimol. That's the Amanita muscaria fly agaric toadstool family. But that is also the fruit of the gods. And that's actually what you're staring at behind me. For those that don't know, that one right there and there. It's really hard to do that backwards. That's Jesus Christ. And what people are like, what do you mean that's Jesus Christ? What people don't know is Christianity. And this isn't a theory. This is true. Before Christianity became what you know Christianity as today, originally, Christianity was about the fly agaric Amanita muscaria mushroom that God gave himself unto himself and sacrificed himself so that they could reach and find themselves. That was the mushroom. The mushroom's also a symbol of phallic worship, of the divine penis, of the spermazoa coming out, the rain falling onto the womb of earth and growing the fruit of the gods. It's all through the Bible. People just lost track of it. And that's actually what the original religion of Christianity was hallucinogenics, and was finding ways to touch into the fruit of the gods. And the manna in the desert that kept Moses and all of his people alive, that every day they woke up and found the bread of the earth, the manna of the gods that allowed them to communicate with Yahweh. What the fuck do you people think that is? That was hallucinogenic mushrooms in the desert. But that's a whole different topic for a whole different time. But I just wanted to say, for the people out there saying like tapping into this higher consciousnesses, that is in fact what it is we're looking at. And we got a comment coming in, says mushrooms are my way as well. And I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm just saying it's a very potent one. If you can't face yourself, what makes you think you can face the God? We read that one. So thank you, Lyra. Now, I think that kind of wraps up our episode. We and Daniel will talk a little bit about what we've been up to since our last endeavors together. But we want to thank you for checking out the Russian sleep experiments. Let us know what you think in the comments, whether it's now before we end the episode, or anything else you want to know from us, or it's later on, and we can certainly contemplate on that and bring it up on another episode. We are so happy to be back, guys. We're sorry for that little snafu earlier with technical difficulties, but it's been great since then. Like I said, it might just be someone fucking with us. I have some type of agency out there that does not like us.
Oh, yeah.
Doing. That's not even a theory, folks. That's a real thing. We've talked about that before. But no, we've been busy. Even though you guys haven't seen us, we've been busy with things. Daniel, I would love to hear what you've been up to the last 6-7 months.
Yes, brother. Thank you. And so with my social media, it's like I love to create content, and I love to share, and I love to make my art. But it's so weird that I walk this fine line between like doing and sharing, right? Because I think a lot of people overshare. And I have this theory too, as we talked about certain entities and certain astral parasites, that like oftentimes when we overshare what our work is, what our craft is, what our art is, it can oftentimes be sabotaged. It can interfered with beings that know how to prey on star seeds and entities that are of a higher frequency. can be interfered with to lower their vibration. And so I feel like I don't talk about what I do as much as I like to just do the thing. So I appreciate the platform and to have a chance to share. I actually run a full scale videography service, and I think that this has probably been one of our busiest summers of our being in business, which is great. So I work full time, creating content and telling stories for other people through the medium of video. And if you guys have had the opportunity to see, say for example, the Paranormal Guys podcast sort of short film that we screened at the beginning of this episode, and you can find that on YouTube. But I do things like that full time, and I make things like that for other people as well. It's actually a service I provide. So we're grateful to be working full time, just producing content and telling stories for people. And another thing that I have been talking about, this is so cool too, Frater. I've been talking about this since probably maybe season 2 of our show a
Yes,
couple years ago.
I know what you're about to say. Absolutely.
The movie. So I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller. And if anybody listening is new to me, new to my content, I work with extraterrestrials. So Frater has his beings and entities and currents that he works with. I work with ET consciousness. I work with off-planet races and civilizations. That's what I do. And so, as a filmmaker, and film and video being my medium in terms of how I produce my art, I try to work that. I try to work that sort of being an extraterrestrial ambassador into my films. So I've been working on this movie for so long that I used to tell Frater about it as a friend of mine as just something I was excited to do someday. Then we started doing it, and now I've been shooting this movie. It's sort of like a dystopian sort of cyberpunk type of idea. I've been shooting it for over a year now, and we're just about to wrap filming finally next month in this
Awesome.
October. We're shooting the final scene. And ever since the production of this film, it's actually evolved into being a 6-episode web series. So it'll eventually have more installments, and we've actually shot scenes for future episodes in the meantime of actually filming this principal movie. So we have one more scene left to wrap principal photography next month in October, and then filming will be done. We've already started editing the movie. We've started editing scenes that we've shot. And then once we have this last scene wrapped, then we can go into what's called as visual effects, sound design. I can start composing the original music because I write all my own music for my films as well too. So I feel like this movie has, in a sense, become like a full-time job for me, because outside of my providing video as a service to other people, in every ounce of my free time, I'm in some way, shape, or form producing this movie. Whether I'm organizing it as a producer, buying props and building sets, or designing how I want the next scene to look, hiring crew and getting together all the people I need to work on scenes, and editing scenes that we've already shot. I'm doing all of this over the last almost year and a half now, around my full-time job, which is creating films for everyone else. So that's what I've been doing these past couple months, and still doing it now as we speak, pretty much 7 days a week. I like to say no time off for good behavior, but that's only because I love what I do. And so really creatively sort of expressing myself through video and through film is something that I've always done. And for those that don't know this, that's how Frater and I met. That's how we became friends. And that's how now we're running a show together. Is I used to produce his music videos. It's a story that I could tell 100 times, because it was like we were two strangers who met on the internet, where he was producing music and needed music videos, and I had just moved to Pittsburgh and was just getting into producing music videos, something that I wanted to do. That's how we met, and now look at what we've made together since. So
It's been crazy, man. It's been a great journey.
I like to use as an example of how, when you act on your highest excitement and you're doing things that you genuinely love and you genuinely want to do, it evolves, that ripples out, and then, it turns into things like this. So,
Well, I think it's important too, because I think one thing, folks, if you're listening out there, one moment of your life truly does and can define the rest of your life. And why do I say this? Daniel reached out to me as an absolute stranger. I was creating music. He was creating music videos. He moved here from Buffalo, New York to Pennsylvania.
That's
I
right.
had no idea who he was, and I get a message one day, "Hey, I love what you're doing. I'm a videographer. I moved here from Buffalo. If you're ever thinking about music videos, I can give you some examples of my work, and I would love to work with you. Let me know what you think." He happened to hit me up at the right time, so there might be more divine power behind that, but I was getting ready to figure out who I wanted to film my first music video ever.
Synchronicity.
The synchronicity was there, and I responded back to Daniel, and we met in a parking lot in Robinson, Pennsylvania, and
That's right.
we filmed a music video as two strangers that didn't know each other, and it turned into 8 music videos, and it turned into multiple other projects. It turned into a paranormal or cryptid documentary that we put out 2 years ago. It turned into the infomercial or commercial that you see at the beginning of this show, and it turned into the last 4 or 5 years of P.O.N.G, Paranormal Guys, and it's been,
That's right.
dozens upon dozens of hours of conversation into the paranormal and metaphysical, and, so many of you have found us, so many of you have reached out, and I wanna thank all of you. The amount of outpouring that I got over the last 6 months of people saying, "When is the show coming back? Where are you guys at? I love what you do." People I've never come across. I just got a comment or 2 a night or 2 ago that said, "I love you guys, and I listen to you every day going to work." And it was from a woman who added me that I thought she added me because of the occult. I had no idea she knew who it was. It found out she loves both, but that's how she found us, was through this show. But I have heard dozens and dozens of people tell me that their drive to work and their drive home from work is Daniel and I. And that means so much to us. So, one moment of Daniel reaching out to me changed so many lives beyond just the 2 of ours.
That's
And
right.
we have
That's
so much
amazing too.
more that we're going to bring to you guys. So, stick around for that. As far as myself, I think most of you know what I've been up to. Doing Nights of the Nephilim, interviewing occultists and talking ceremonial magic and telling you guys how you can find your inner strength and how you can do ritual to tap into other levels of consciousness, whether it be through the use of entheogens behind me, whether it be through the use of ritual, that we need to explore the faculties of our own mind, because the rest of the world will find ways to hold you down and make you think that you're merely just a flesh being that's here to live, to marry, to have kids, and to die. And while that is a beautiful thing, and that journey needs to happen as well, there's so much more than that. Because while
Right.
this is temporary flesh, there's eternal spirit, and we need to tap into that and be able to use and house that in ways that most of you, if you haven't done it yet, can't fathom until you start doing it. So my last year since our last episodes have been really just exploring the depths of myself, exploring the depths of practice, redefining and synthesizing my own personal ritual practice, and doing my shows and bringing you guys the content that I can. So, thank you guys for the love that you share. If you haven't checked out Daniel's work, make sure you check out Tragic Hero Productions, check out what they do. The music videos, if you haven't checked out Skippy Ickham, I don't really rap anymore, but for a very, very long time I did. I have 7 albums out, 8 music videos, several battles. If you like gritty, horrorcore, underground, brutal lyricism, I Once Upon a Time was pretty good. So you can check that out, and check out other videos by Daniel and his short films, and check out, his project that he just was talking about that he's about to release. It's going to be a good one. And it's been his passion project and his dream for many, many years. And it's about to come to fruition, and we all need to support that. So thank you guys for allowing us to do what we love. Last couple comments before we jump off here. We have Tara saying, "Hey guys." We have, they're saying, "You guys are awesome." We have a comment I threw up earlier but didn't get to read. It says, "The most horrifying, beautiful journey engulfs yet connects." And it does. I do things that are frightening and most people would shit their pants, but I thrive within that horror. And through that horror, I connect to conscious levels and get downloads that I couldn't imagine not having. My life is spent in an obscure bubble that has been very fruitful for me, and I couldn't have it any other way. We have It's been great to watch this grow over the years. And then Skippy Ickham was dope. Thank you, AJ. You have been a big supporter of me, brother, and I want to thank you for all the shares, all the love that you personally have shown. If you don't know who AJ is, check him out. He does underground horrorcore, hardcore rap as well. And make sure you support him and support anybody out there doing what they love to do, as that is very important. As I've always said, you all are the lifeblood of what keeps us doing what we love to do. Other than that, guys, Daniel, any last words before we close out tonight?
Yes. So I would like to say one thing, not just to our listeners and to people that I'm honored to call fans, but I have to just mention this one thing, was that the main reason why we had to delay the start of season 4 was because my mother, who was a huge fan of Skippy Ickums and a huge fan of our show, she passed away. So my mother transitioned, and I can honestly say that my mom had listened to every single episode, sometimes 2 to 3 times over, of our show. And I had to take care of her and help send her off for, her transition into the next phase of her journey, which was ultimately why we delayed the start of season 4. So I'd like to give a shout out to my mom, who was a huge fan of our show and loved everything that we did together and everything that we did just as individuals. So big thank you to my mother for listening. And thank you to everybody that's here with us now in this moment. And the last thing I also want to say, as we go into season 4, this is also, Frater, we need to figure this out, okay? When we set out to do this show, we agreed that every topic that we covered and all the feedback and the stories that were shared to us and all of our callers, we were going to be making sort of like a legend, like a key of information, of data that comes from all over the world, because we do get remarks and comments and correspondence from listeners from all over the world. But at some point, someday, in some season, we have to make a legend of all of the stories that have been shared on this show, on this platform, and see how we can connect the dots and start to make like a database of stories and information on the paranormal and the supernatural and the esoteric that we could somehow use constructively to maybe find some sort of common thread or continuity between all of the stories and all of the listeners and all of the things that have been shared here, right? Make a database and a legend and a key of all these things and see sort of what we can do with it, right? Maybe like someday we make like, we could maybe produce something as a
I agree.
result, like a book.
Well,
We can
and it's
make
funny
our
you
own
say that.
celestial oddities. Like, what if we made our own celestial oddities, like dictionary?
Yes, that's actually what I was going to throw out to you when you started to say that, is that I had the thought of you and I writing a book together jointly where we go through, and it is almost like a dictionary style book where each chapter, so to speak, is a different thing. Shadow beings, Yeti, organism 46B, the man from Torrid, all of these sections, and it just be the book of supernatural and paranormal phenomena of some sort. And each
As
section,
expressed by
as
the
expressed by the
paranormal
two of us.
guys.
Yes, and expressed by the paranormal guys, and we go over and you and I synthesize down each chapter of what we talked about, what was shared with us on phone calls, because some of our topics have been talked about by people who maybe never even heard that conversation.
That's right.
But called and said, "Hey, I had this situation with this dog man." Well, have you heard our episode about dog men? So we can bring that into it and synthesize it down to a short, neat chapter about each and every single topic that we've covered and heard about, and release it as a book, and then you and I do it as an audio book and
Right.
release it so people can buy and read it, but people can also listen to it as almost like the show, but synthesized down in a neat form, because some people love to hear us just scab
Yeah.
out for an hour and a half. Some people want to hear an hour and a half of a solid book where they're like, holy shit, in the last hour and a half, I heard about 25 subjects.
Right.
That is something I think we can do, folks, and your support would help. And now when the time comes, we might have to do a GoFundMe account of things, because there's a lot of expenses. And Daniel and I aren't worried about making money. We don't give a shit about
Right.
that. But what
No.
we do want to do is be able to afford and have the necessities of being able to do the things that we envision for you guys.
Yes.
So
And
if we can do that, we can do it.
and an opportunity for volunteers. Okay. So here's where I'm getting at with this.
Yes.
So when you and I first started this show years ago, like what year was it? 19, 18? I don't remember. 20? Was it 2020?
It might have been 19.
I think it was 19.
Yeah, 19.
One of our original ideas, what we wanted to create, like some sense of continuity between all of the stories in the general realm of the supernatural and the esoteric. We wanted to create like a database of stories and then see if there was some sort of missing puzzle piece in all of this raw data in this sort of topic in this field that we could use to maybe bridge a certain gap. And one thing that we're going to need, right, is we actually probably have to transcribe all these episodes. Or at the very least, we need to go back through all the seasons and make a database of the stories and the things that people shared when they called in and the discussions that happened on our interview episodes, not just the topics that you and I sort of provided and discussed, but all of the data that we've harvested and collected from our audience too, from stories that have been shared and from the call-in episodes. All of that needs to, in a sense, get categorized. It needs to get logged, organized, and categorized so that we can start going through it with like a different perspective and looking for common threads and synchronicities and how they all sort of connect, especially when you have like stories coming in from other parts of the world and different cultures and stuff.
I think that's important. You said the key word volunteers. So if any of you guys out there are listening and say, you know what, I might be useful, can't guarantee that we have a spot for you, but we can certainly field you out and talk to you and see if maybe it's a good fit. And if so, we would love your help. I mean, this isn't something, like I said, we do for fame or money. We do this to get the right information out to the right people. Same thing as Knights of the Nephilim. I've had people give me opportunities to be bigger than I am right now that I didn't take advantage of because I didn't want to be the puppet under anybody else's strings but our own. We want to do what we do, how we do it, and we want to give you 100% authentic us. It will never be anything but us. I don't care about any contracts or anything like that. Neither does Daniel. We want to give you guys the raw information, and anybody else out there that's on the page with us and wants to help us, please do, because we can make a difference. We can make a book, an audio book, a data catalog of all the things we've heard and experienced. We can continue to make seasons of this and talk about every single subject you guys want to talk about. And that brings me to a point that if you have a suggestion for the season, celestialoddities@gmail.com. The Black Magician, you want to know how to get a hold of me? celestialoddities@gmail.com. Send me an email. I will always respond. And we would love to hear what you have to say. We have several professionals coming on this season. Some guys and gals you guys are going to want to hear about that we have lined up. And we'll be doing our call-in episodes, which will be really fun this year. So we're really looking forward to that. And other than that, we have a lot planned. So
there it is.
And be ready for it, guys. Share it around. And in 2 weeks, what's the date? 2 weeks, the 28th of September, we will bring you our next episode. I'm not telling you what it is yet, but we'll announce it soon. Be watching out for it. Make sure you support our pages and, share it around. And real quick, we want to say thank you or hello. We threw another comment up there. Good evening to you as well. You caught us just at the end, but thank you for tuning in. As always, guys, it is an absolute pleasure. We love you, and we'll catch you next time on Paranormal Guys Podcast. You guys take care.